starting a brand has never been easier. An Instagram account, a good product can put you on the map, but turning that into a household name is a totally different game. Today, I'm breaking down the differences between starting a brand and scaling it to become a formidable player. As of the published date of this episode, I am an associate of Ulta Beauty. The ideas and thoughts represented here are my own and not that of my employer. Welcome to the Scaling Emerging Beauty Podcast, a show that provides actionable insights for early stage emerging beauty brands looking to scale at retail. I'm Monique Benoit, the host of the show. I'm a former retail buyer, and I've spent years working with beauty brands and retailers to help products hit the shelves of major stores. For today's solo episode, I'm going to touch on the very title of this podcast, Scaling an Emerging Beauty Brand. I'm going to highlight this because many will start a brand, but few will scale. Also, I find that I've run into a lot of founders that will often reach out to me and say, hey, I've made $40,000 on Amazon. I'm ready to sell my product at Target. And I think it's important to just highlight the difference. You can scale a brand to $1 million on Amazon, but that doesn't mean it's going to be successful at a major retailer like Target or Walmart. I also think it's important to know that if you don't want to scale your brand to major retails, that's fine too. So let's talk about the difference today and let's get into it. I was actually just reading an article from the Business of Fashion, and it was talking about this very topic. Now, at the time of this recording, it's mid-January. I think that Lauren Lieberman is the woman who published this op-ed talking about how it's so different for brands that are scaling now versus how it was before. I'll make sure I include a link in the bio, even though there's a paywall, but if you have a subscription, it's a really interesting read. She was saying that the brands that are seeing the most significant growth all were founded within the past 10 years. But she was also saying that there's so many new brands that it's a very crowded market. And she kind of threw out this idea that is the ceiling for how big a brand can be going to change because of the number of brands that are in the market. Absolutely fascinating. I mean, clearly I'm a nerd and I love this stuff, but I digress. But let's just go ahead and talk a little bit about ease of entry, because this can pose a business challenge for brands to consider. And I always say that it's important to understand your competition and to understand the landscape at which you're doing business in so that you can do your best job and put your best foot forward. Entering into starting a brand is easier than ever. Social media platforms like Instagram or TikTok allow anyone with a phone to start a brand with minimal upfront costs. Additionally, there's widened access to white label manufacturers, which means folks can easily have access to manufacturers overseas and product samples. You don't have to invest a lot in R&D to launch a brand these days. And there are plenty of influencers with large followings that have launched their own skincare or beauty brand and have a decent revenue stream. Now, when you start a brand from an influencing platform, you already have some of the foundations that are crucial to building a brand. You have an audience, you have a goal or a story that your followers are invested in. And so this helps you have a solid foundation for a consumer base. With that said, this foundation is not necessarily going to translate to the masses. How many of us have seen celebrities come out with a beauty brand and wondered, is this really different? Is this going to be the next drunk elephant? I'm looking at you, J-Lo. No shade. But I'm saying that to say that just because you have a big following doesn't necessarily mean you have a brand that's going to be here for the long haul. Scaling a brand to sit on retailer shelves, to have thousands of points of distribution, This is very different than selling product to your loyal followers on your beloved social media accounts. First off, scaling a brand to that level requires significant capital, funding, manufacturing partners that have huge capabilities in terms of putting product out there. And also, managing inventory and logistics at scale brings a new set of skills and requirements and challenges. Also, because it's easier than ever to start a brand, differentiation is that much more important for brands that are looking to scale. Now, I talk about differentiation a whole lot on this podcast. That's because the retail merchant in me knows just how important that is, okay? But for you brands, if you are looking to scale meaningfully, I personally think that product innovation is critical. Do not take a white label product off the line and slap a label on it and try to make it your own. That is not going to cut it. So that means if you are formulating things at your home, you're asking for the most cutting edge technology so that you can be sure that your product is going to be ready to compete and provide something new that the consumer has not seen. I do think there are some caveats to having cutting edge product innovation. I think that if you're a brand founder that's creating a new category, that you can have something that is a bit new, because essentially by creating a new category, you're already innovating in a different way. Outside of having a new category though, you better come with some really good product innovation. I'm talking texture, form, all of those things. Remember, both the consumer and the retailer, we've seen a lot. So you better come with it. Think about some of the recent viral trends that are absolutely knocking consumer socks off. I'm thinking about jelly blushes or soft cushion foundations, zit stickers, a little bit old, but all of those things use innovation. There's texture, there's form, there's a new format. Your product innovation is critical for you to be able to differentiate yourself. It has to be differentiated in order for you to scale successfully. Now, when scaling, you also need a team. But many times I know you can't afford a team. So that means you need to know the people who can connect you with the right team at the right time so that you can slot folks in as a part-time contractor or on a project basis so that you can get what you need from those subject matter experts when you need it. It's also a way for you to have an efficient spend. I actually talk a little bit about building a team as an emerging brand in one of my earlier episodes. I think it was season 3. I'll make sure that I link it in the show notes and also add a link above for those watching on YouTube. Being able to sell a brand on your own platform to your loyal consumers that have been following you for years, or selling face to face when you have that kind of electric personality, when you know that you can convince and just sell your product, is very different than having your product sit on a shelf, independent from any voiceover that you can provide or any context. And that is also a key difference in scaling. And this is why I say it is so important to have a crystal clear position on who your brand is and why you're selling what you're selling. Because when you sit on those shelves, nobody is going to be there to talk about that. It has to be able to come through in the packaging, and it also has to be able to come through in some of that pre-work that you've done in building that audience and building that connection with your consumer. By having that audience built, you'll have a bit of a proof point and you'll know what works. You'll know what that consumer is looking for and what's important to them so that when you get to the shelf, you can have a super efficient spin or just a great way to be able to talk to the consumer and know that they're going to like the way that you're selling to them. And that leads me to my next point, which is that authentic connections matter. I talk a lot about building community here, and scaling a brand at a mass level where you're talking about big retailers is about selling a solution to a big community. Now, this is where I personally feel that your problem has to be big enough to appeal to a big base of folks, millions of individuals, actually. And for this reason, I actually think that the idea of niching down too much can be a challenge if big scale is truly your goal. When you're talking about looks or aesthetics that are so specific, you can sometimes box yourself in and make it difficult for you to appeal to enough of the masses to hit the benchmarks that are necessary when you're talking or working with big retailers. Now, with that, you might offer a product where there are ways for you to make your niche applicable to everyone. One example that comes to mind is bold makeup. I'm actually wearing some orange eyeshadow right now, but I'm saying that to say that orange eyeshadow is not the top pick for a lot of individuals. But the right marketer or the right storyteller might be able to find a way to share how orange eyeshadow might be a fun thing for you to pick up for Halloween, or how it might be a fun way for you to play into some new fill-in-the-blank core look that's trending on social media, right? The idea here is that there are some niche ideas that can be marketed to the masses. It's all about telling a good story and about relating it to the consumer in a way where they're going to say, actually, I didn't think about that, but I think I like it. Another point that's really important when you're thinking about scaling is making data-driven decisions. As you're looking to scale, you do not have time or money to waste. And this is where data can really come in to help you out. You should be looking at things like customer insights from comments that you're seeing on social media or reviews that you're receiving from your DTC site, and looking to optimize your spend for different marketing campaigns. Or you can also look at optimizing the way that you're actually talking to your consumer. Maybe they prefer some carousels over reels. Maybe they prefer talking via educational moments. Either way, by looking at the data and seeing what's actually driving whatever the goal is for that campaign, that's going to be a really critical way for you to ensure that you are scaling in a really efficient and appropriate way. Make sure you measure the effectiveness of your ads, set those goals, and evaluate that performance based on the goals. I'm pretty sure I also talk about this in detail in another season, so I'm going to go ahead and link that here as well and include it in the show notes for those who are listening. Now, I've come to the end of this episode, so I'm just going to give a quick recap. Starting a brand might feel like climbing a hill, but scaling is like climbing a mountain, probably one of the biggest mountains that's out there. Kilimanjaro kind of rings a tune. But either way, it takes vision, resilience, resources, and a solid strategy in order for you to scale a brand successfully. It's actually easier than ever, I would say, to sell $1 million here or there as someone with a big social following. But it is harder than ever to scale and appeal to the masses. So hear me when I say this. There is a difference. There is a difference. And make sure that you are setting your brand up so that that difference is clear. Be differentiated. Make sure that your positioning for your brand is crystal clear so that when your brand sits on the shelf and there's no voiceover, that consumer knows exactly what they're there for. Authenticity matters. Build that voice with that consumer and make sure that you're talking to them in a way that feels true and authentic to them. And finally, remember, track the data. These things matter. This is going back to that strategy piece. You need to make sure that you know your numbers and that you're making investments in the right places with the right team as you're building things out so that you can scale successfully. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you made it to the end, I appreciate you being here. You didn't have to listen to the end, so thank you. If you found this helpful, I encourage you to share this with a friend or a colleague. And if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss a future episode. As always, I appreciate you listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Bye. Miracle, what are you doing?